This is the mission, is to take care of the people around us. And if you've lost sight of that in the hopes of building a bigger church, building a fitness center, making a more popular book, causing a ruckus at the public library. Kirk Cameron shuts down a library in order to read a book. Hi, I'm Scott.
I'm Mark.
It sounds every bit as pathetic as it really is, or it is as really pathetic as it sounds. Okay, so here's the deal. We've done 2 episodes on this already. This is episode number 3, but we need to talk about it because it's that stupid.
And it hurts so much every time.
It hurts that much. Kirk Cameron wrote a children's book, and he wanted it to sell better, so he created this fake conspiracy, and he said that, these churches that I went out and I requested to do a book reading, and they said, you know what, if you want to rent the room, feel free, but we're not going to pay for this book reading. We're not going to pay for you to come out and read this book. If you want to rent the room, feel free to rent it yourself. And he turned it into a whole story of, well, we have these anti-men, anti-white men, anti-Christian libraries out there that won't let me read my book, which is patently false, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, Indianapolis, Indiana, the library had the good sense to say, look, nobody here pays us enough to put up with this BS. So you want to come read your book? Come read your book. You know, basically treating him like a 3-year-old, which he deserves, right?
Yeah.
Not a big problem, except that this is Indiana, and everybody shows up as a result, right? Every Christian in the area shows up. Depending on which Christian outlet you believe. Like the bookseller, the book publisher, Brave, they claimed 2,500 people showed up, and Christian Headlines ran with that number. Who cares about fact checking? Who cares about truth? But the library themselves say, hey, maybe like realistically closer to 700, 750, right? So, numbers. Who knew they would be so hard? Who knew, right?
Well,
and normally I wouldn't care that much, except that the library is a public place that is open to everybody to make use of.
Right.
Everybody seeking knowledge, everybody seeking literature. In many libraries, this is people's only connection to a free and public internet. So it truly is the repository of knowledge for a community. And because these Christians wanted to come out and do a public spectacle, they basically created a situation where the library couldn't be used for its intended purposes. It just drives me up a wall.
And what for? Like, what was the point? Like, I seriously question how many of these people would have shown up to the library in the first place if it had just gone off without any of the media drama around this whole thing.
Exactly. It would be one thing if, like, they had figured out how to repackage it. Come out here, show your support for Kirk and his book, and we're going to do something to show our support for the library. Right?
Yeah.
But that wasn't it. Like, nobody who came out cared about the library, cared about literature, cared about the feeding of people's minds and the bettering of society. Nobody cared about that. All they cared about was, I'm a Christian and my values are being persecuted and there's a war going on. So I need to show up so I can be part of the spectacle and maybe meet the kid from Growing Pains. It's like, come on, really? He wasn't even that good in Growing Pains, and I don't know if you remember this, but the show was canceled as a result of his Christianity gone awry.
Yeah, and it's just like, because like, if it's not one Cameron, it's another.
Yes.
So like, I feel like maybe there's like some sort of like congenital defect in their brains that just like that makes them need to be at the center of attention. And I'm saying this in jest because I mean I do have respect for Kirk Cameron, but like I don't have to respect everything he does. I don't respect everything I do, for crying out loud. I'm sorry. Going to give him the flag, and then like to the extent that I think it's cool that that Christians showed up to show solidarity and support for him.
Yeah,
like, I'm okay with that, but the way it worked out, like, causing a library, a public place, not to be able to function, I mean, really just tells me that, that wasn't the venue for it. Like, if you had that much appeal, like, you should have used a different venue that it could have held that number of people, like maybe an auditorium somewhere or something. And so, like, the act of solidarity kind of rings hollow for me because and again, it kind of registers for me as that here's my public performance of my Christianity. Yeah, maybe I'm being too cynical about it. I don't know. What do you think?
No, and in this case, it's literally a public performance. It's not just kind of like that
Hmm.
figurative public performance that we talk about so often. This is literally a disingenuous performative act that has nothing to do with the transformation of young minds or the deepening of somebody's understanding of the nature of God and the love of
Right.
Jesus. None of that is at play here. This is a purely one dimensional, I got books to sell, and the more I can keep myself in the headline, the more books I can sell. Really, is like it is so incredibly transparent. That's kind of the part that's heartbreaking. Like there's no layer to this that kind of says, and God will be glorified. You know what I mean? There's no glorification of God anywhere in this.
Yeah, I think of some biblical events, like Pentecost, right? So
Yeah.
you have the apostles, and they're out there speaking in tongues, and people from all over the world are hearing those apostles speaking their own language.
Right.
So, like, if somebody was from Macedonia, if they were Greek speaking, if they were Latin speaking, if speaking Coptic or anything else, they heard all these apostles speaking their own language.
Yeah.
And it's like there's this huge event, and so all these people that didn't really believe in God or didn't believe in the power of Christ or whatever, like glorified God as account of this. They're like, oh my gosh, like look at the power of this God, that this God could do this.
Yes.
And how many non-believers do you think are standing up applauding Kirk Cameron and his posse of 700 to 2,500 people for
Yeah.
shutting down the library? I doubt many of them are just standing up and going, "Look at how great God is because they shut down a library." No.
Right. Exactly right. Exactly right. So I came up with basically three big points that I wanted to make about how this breaks the
Mhm.
church. The first one to me is that it reveals to America in particular, it reveals to America a church that did not come to be served, did not come to serve, but came to be served.
Yeah.
Which is a complete inversion of what Mark tells us, right? Mark tells us that the Son of Man came to serve, not to be
Mhm.
served, right? And it goes back to that whole thing where, like, if my life and your life, if our lives don't look something like the life of Jesus, we're doing it wrong.
Generally.
You know what I mean? The second thing I had to say, I mean, feel free to add whatever you want to add.
Mhm.
The second thing I said is it reveals a church that glories in their wins in imaginary battles when being incredibly feckless in fighting real battles of the kingdom. Feeding the hungry, clothing the naked. All the couple episodes ago, we had like 12 Bible verses of the reasons the Bible said when Bible tells us that charity is important. All those things that we listed, those are all real battles, and they're battles because they're impossible to win. We've been fighting these fights for thousands of years, trying to end poverty, and homelessness, and hunger, and we haven't done them yet.
Mhm.
And that's how you know it's hard, and that these fights still need fighting.
Yeah, I think your words here, like imaginary battles, I think is exquisite here. Because when we put on victimhood,
Mm,
it's not a good look for anybody. And that
right.
seems to be like the whatever you want to call it, the chic thing to do right now in Christian circles is to act like you're the
Yeah.
victim. Like, oh, they're making fun of my religion in the media. Oh, they're making a mockery of my beliefs about marriage or gender. It's like, well, stop being the victim, right? Because like
Hmm.
that's the battle that it seems to me like that's the most imaginary that they're fighting. They just keep fighting this
Yeah.
culture war that only they're fighting.
Yeah, I completely agree. Instead of doing the things we know we should do, we go out and look for distractions.
Mhm.
I totally agree with that. And my last thing was, it reveals a church that only meaningfully comes alive when there's something in it for them.
Right.
Usually money, right? In today's American culture of mega churches and Christian celebrity, like typically it's money or growth or something that we can very easily kind of equate to capitalism,
Mhm.
right? Some sort of growth of some kind. So,
Yeah,
like, and that,
like
yeah,
there's something narcissistic about it. I
yeah,
mean, maybe that's not the right word. I mean,
yeah,
but like from what you're describing, like that's the word that's coming to my mind is like this is a narcissistic act because like now these people that attended this function at this library now get to stand up and talk about how awesome it was that they were there.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
it becomes this thing. Like it's a whole like recursive thing where
yeah,
it's like it just
yeah,
feeds on. It's like I'm gonna play the victim and then I'm gonna do something so I can claim to be the victor in a situation and then immediately play the victim and kind of so on and so forth.
yeah. Can I, would you mind if I do my theology according to West Wing again?
Oh,
I know you hate it. That's why I love doing it.
Aaron
So,
Sorkin will
there's
burn
an
in hell forever.
yeah. There's an episode where they come up with the phrase. They don't come, but they talk about "vox populi, vox dei,"
Hmm.
right? The voice of the people is the voice of God. And when I first heard that, I did not. I understood it wrong, right? It's like, oh, that seems wise. Like the voice of the way I understand the voice of the people is the voice of consensus,
Hmm.
is the voice of God. And that actually sounds like wisdom, except it's not, right? The voice of the mob is not the voice of God, which is the point, right?
That's a
And
t-shirt right there.
right? And so this is what this feels like. It feels like a mob of people got together at a library. And let's not talk about the parallels between this and January 6th, but like, okay, we have a mob of people who get together and it's just kind of like this self-reassuring, well, we're in this together, so it must not be
Hmm.
bad. It must not be boastful. It must not be prideful. Like it must be holy and God honoring, even though it's anything but, you know?
So he shows up at another library and he's being surrounded and supported by a like a large congregation of leaders of the church. I mean, like I guess the Pope would be a bad example, but like like think of like famous pastors, like like maybe like L. Sharpton is there, and
Yeah,
maybe Francis Chan is there, and whoever people that might be from across the spectrum of church leadership. So not just evangelical pastors and not just Lutheran pastors, but like like a conglomeration of different faith leaders.
sure.
I mean, within the Christian faith, right? So it's like, what would your take
Yeah,
on that event be then? Would it be the same
yeah.
as like these 700 randos showing up, or would it be different?
That's a really, really good question. The question, like, so I think that the next question you have to answer for me is like, what's the purpose for them showing up? This same book reading?
Yeah, over this same book.
That one would be a really tough call for me. It seems like the opposite of washing people's feet. It
Hmm.
seems like instead, like, hey, let me get all of the icons of the faith together in order to command authority, right? And there's only one authority, and his name is
Yeah.
Jesus, right? So if you're trying to be the authority, then you've terribly misread the Gospels, you know? Is kind of where I come down on
Hmm.
that.
I mean, because like when I look at how like your rank and file Christian will behave, right? I mean, like you and me, it's a lot easier to mobilize people like us than it is to
Yeah.
mobilize pastors
Oh, yeah, that's a good
and
point. Yeah.
bishops, or if your denomination runs that way. It's like
Right.
it's a lot
Yeah.
harder to mobilize those people. So it's
Yeah.
like, and that's kind of what I was thinking. I'm like, if there was like a really wide support across denominations, not like I mean across denominations outside of like the evangelical label,
Yeah.
and you saw so many church leaders being motivated to come out and support him, like that would at least give me pause. I mean, I might ultimately still disagree with what's going on, but it would at least
Right.
make me stand back and take a minute to like analyze, am I the wrong jerk, here? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. So how do we heal what's broken? I think of it this way. We live in Chicago. You throw a stone in any direction, you're going to hit a megachurch. I
Yeah.
used to live near Indianapolis. If you literally spit in any direction, you would hit a megachurch,
Yeah.
okay? And in every megachurch, in every church, there's like this beautiful script font on the wall, and there's a mission statement. And that mission statement always reads something like the mission of the church is to develop fully formed followers of Jesus, or to know Jesus, to make Jesus known. Things
Yeah.
of that nature, right? And to me, that seems to be a pie in the sky mission, an unreasonable mission, when you come back to reality and you realize that for most Christians in the United States, church is this thing they do for 90 minutes on a Sunday. It is a very small sliver of their life that they treat in a very fast food way, right? Oh, it's like, I don't like the pickles and lettuce here. Let's go check out that other church, you know? And they do this, you know. And so I think in a fast food church kind of world, we set the bar at such a height that there is no other option than to fail in the mission. And I think that the way we fix this is to get back to the real mission, right? I highlighted Deuteronomy 15 just because it talks about like, hey, every once in a while, you got to forgive people their debts.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you got to set the slaves free. 7 years in the case of the Bible, in the case of this passage, right?
Yeah.
Every once in a while, you just have to accept the fact that it's good to be charitable to poor people, to be home to people in need. Like every once in a while, you just have to get your best cow or your best sheep, and instead of getting the best price at the market, you've got to make a feast out of it and feed everybody in the town, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the mission, is to take care of the people around us. And if you've lost sight of that in the hopes of building a bigger church, building a fitness center, making a more popular book, causing a ruckus at the public library, if that's become your mission instead of the mission of making the lives better in the world around you, that's where the real deal is. That's where you find Jesus. That's where you find purpose. That's where you find a meaning of grace and peace, finding peace with yourself and God and others. That's where you find the real stuff of life, not in this like, let's show up for the circus at the public library.
Yeah, and maybe, I would just want to kind of maybe tack on to that, just this idea. I mean, maybe one of the biggest problems with or maybe the biggest problem with that, like the mission statements of churches is that they have one.
Yes. Yeah, preach. Yeah.
Because we don't need a mission statement. We have, expectations given to us by Scripture. We don't need to lay that out in the statement. Vision, or like mission statements, like those are for corporations that want to make you feel good about what they're doing to you. I mean, that's, that's my cynical hat, there. I can't remember if it's my church's current one or if it's old now, which I should know that being on the leadership team.
Shame on you, Mark.
Right, but like
Shame
it was like that mission statement was like to know Christ and to make him known. But that's super vague.
Yeah.
And like you're making me think about it. I'm like, man, that's awful now. I hate it.
Yeah, like that's not the worst of them. Like the full, like to make fully formed disciples of Jesus. That one strikes me as kind of be pretty full of yourself. Like I'm like it reminds me of like Ben Kenobi, who thought he could be as good as Yoda as a teacher, right? Like that's thinking pretty highly of yourself to think you can be as good a teacher as Jesus was.
Yeah. Although what was it? There was some church over here. It was like World Overcomers Church, and it was like something about like a place where like God makes your dreams come true or something.
It's Disney.
Oh my gosh. Oh, it was so terrible. But like, yeah, we have a mission, like you said. We got to get to that mission, and we don't need to like sweat it anymore, right?
Exactly right. Here's the deal. We're Church is Lame. We are two guys, Mark and I. We love the church. We want to see it succeed. We want to see it grow. But we are in a season where it seems like the church is losing credibility, where it is harder to get people in those doors compared to how easy it is to lose people. And we think there are real reasons for that. Instead of just millennials are not cool and millennials are selfish. We think there are better reasons.
Yeah.
And on this, every week, we come together to talk about those things and put those reasons in an archive that can be thought through. So, by all means, if you're thinking about this too, by all means, please hit the like and subscribe button and join us on this journey. Leave a comment if there's something you want us to consider, something we haven't considered. And if you're listening to this on a podcast, please subscribe Apple Podcast. Shoot us an email, churcheslamepodcast@gmail.com.
And with that, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Amen.